My name is Rachel Ford. I'm 39 years old. It's not personal Rachel, just budget adjustments. Welcome to the new war. That's what General Whitaker says as he closes the file on the table in front of me. I don't flinch. I don't speak. I stare at the man who once called me his greatest find, who toasted me at a Pentagon gala when I turned 28, who now sits across the glass table and tells me my salary has been slashed by 63% effective immediately. The conference room is full. Legal finance, 2 HR reps I've never met. Everyone stares down at their tablets. No one meets my eyes. The room smells like burnt coffee and betrayal. I straighten my blazer. My pulse is steady, too steady. That's how I know my survival mode has kicked in. I've trained myself not to show blood. Not in front of generals, but inside, I'm burning. He continues, "Your role's been reassigned. You'll consult on compliance from now on. No travel, no press. The Obsidian Initiative is being handled by another division." The Obsidian Initiative. My brainchild, my blueprint, my signature on every line of code. I almost laugh. I don't. Because just then, my phone buzzes. One notification. CNN 130 Manars Obsidian Cyber Program leads global security talks. Architect unnamed. Unnamed. I turn the screen to face Whitaker. I don't say anything. I don't have to. Because he knows what I know. It's too late to erase me. I stand. Everyone in the room shifts, and I walk out without waiting for dismissal. Because if they thought I was done, they forgot one thing: I build systems designed to withstand attack. Even this. The hallway feels colder than it did 2 hours ago. I pass the steel security doors that once recognized my fingerprint like a trusted friend. My badge still works for now, but my name is already vanishing from rosters, Slack channels, email chains. It started weeks ago subtly, like a virus in the metadata, but today was the first direct hit. A public gutting, a surgical demotion, and I saw it coming. I just didn't expect it to hurt this much. When I reach my office, a narrow glass cube on the top floor, I shut the door and sit down slowly like something in me might break. 63%. It's not just money. It's a message, a power play, a warning to anyone who still associates with me. They couldn't discredit my work, so they're trying to make me small. But the funny thing about shrinking a woman like me, I only get sharper. Whitaker didn't used to be like this. He was my first mentor. Took me under his wing when I was 26 and stupid enough to think mentorship meant protection. He opened doors, got me clearance levels other civilians waited years for. I thought he believed in me, but it wasn't belief, it was ownership. And when I started speaking in rooms, he used to translate for me, and when I stopped asking permission, he changed. Little things at first, correcting me in public, asking if I was tired when I made points he didn't like, calling my ideas ambitious instead of sound. Then came the stall, the funding delays, the meetings I wasn't invited to, the congressional briefings where I was mentioned only in passing, if at all. But none of it stopped me, because Project Obsidian was good, better than good. It was airtight, innovative, necessary. I didn't build it to get credit. I built it because the world needed it, but I did deserve the credit. And now they're trying to erase me from my own legacy. I turn back to my desk, open my laptop. My access to the internal servers is still intact for now. I pull up the Obsidian framework. The lines of code feel like my own handwriting. I could recognize them in my sleep. I scroll to the authorship metadata. Whitaker J. Ford, R. Ford, R. Ford, R. I smile. Good luck scrubbing all of that. There's a knock at the door. It's Diane, my old operations partner. She slips in quietly and shuts it behind her. I just heard she says, "Are you okay?" I nod. Too fast. She sits across from me. Her eyes are sharp, tired. She's seen this happen to others. She didn't think it would happen to me. "You know this isn't about budget," she says. "I know. You're trending. I know." "What are you going to do?" I lean back, and for the first time since the meeting, I let the edges of a plan form. "I'm going to make sure the world knows what I built." And Whitaker. I look her in the eye. He forgot who taught him how to cover his digital tracks. Diane exhales somewhere between a laugh and a prayer. When she leaves, I lock the door again. Then I start writing. Not code, a list. Everyone who was in that room today, every file where my name appears, every timestamp that proves authorship, every silent ally who hasn't spoken yet. This isn't a war, it's a cleanup. And I'm done playing nice. I didn't grow up in a house full of code. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, the daughter of a public school teacher and a welder. My mother taught biology in the same classroom for 27 years. My father worked double shifts in a steel factory until he slipped a disc and never quite walked right again. We didn't talk about ambition. We talked about making rent, but I had one thing that didn't belong there, a mind that caught patterns in everything. By age 10, I was solving equations in my head that baffled my teachers. By 12, I was building logic puzzles with colored magnets on the side of our fridge just to feel something click. And by 15, I had jailbroken my first school-issued laptop to build a local intranet forum where students could leave anonymous feedback about their teachers. My principal thought I was hacking grades. I wasn't. I just wanted to create a system where someone like my mother, who cried quietly when no one left comments on her evaluations, could finally hear that she mattered. I wasn't building systems for rebellion. I was building them for justice. I earned a scholarship to MIT at 17. When the letter came, my dad just stared at the envelope like it was a spaceship. "You really gonna leave all this behind?" he asked. All what I said, not out of disrespect, but because I genuinely didn't know what he meant. I think he meant them. The life they understood. The one that had limits and ceilings and a long flat hallway of expectation. I left anyway. I had to. Because from the moment I stepped into MIT's Digital Systems Lab, I felt like someone had finally opened the right door. And inside, I wasn't weird. I was useful. I graduated magna cum laude, took a job at a think tank in D.C. focused on cybercrime forecasting. There, I met my first ghosts threats that had no name, only fingerprints and data. By 27, I was recruited into a classified contractor role with the Department of Defense. They said I was too young, too direct, too solitary. But I was fast, and my code worked, even when theirs didn't. That's when General Marcus Whitaker entered the story. Back then, he wasn't just brass, he was a political star. Decorated, press-ready, a public servant who could quote Sun Tzu and Taylor Swift in the same breath. He gave speeches at war colleges and smiled like he'd already written the chapter history hadn't caught up to yet. He said I was the girl with the mind of a tank. He said I reminded him of the ones who never made it past the sand. And then he did what very few powerful men do. He listened. He brought me into a small war room task force working on cyber-shielding high-value infrastructure dams, power grids, GPS systems. I started writing protocols they would test under blackout conditions. Whitaker would walk in late, read my models, then ask me questions that didn't sound like praise, but they were. What happens if the attack doesn't come through the door? What if it's already in the walls? That's when Obsidian was born, not in name, but in need. The idea was simple. A unified anticipatory digital defense system that merged predictive AI, real-time human intel, and behavioral forensics. A system that wasn't just reactive, it watched the battlefield before anything exploded. It could have saved billions. It could have prevented the last 6 breaches we patched too late. At first, no one took it seriously. Too expensive, too complex, too female-led. Whitaker defended me. Hard. I thought it was loyalty. Looking back, it was leverage. He wanted to be tied to the next big win. And as Obsidian evolved, grew from code skeleton to a full strategy document, his name crept in. At first, it was just endorsed by. Then it became conceptualized in partnership with. Then I started hearing his voice in meetings, pitching my lines like he'd written them in the shower. But I told myself it didn't matter. As long as the system was built, I didn't care who got the applause. That was my first mistake. When Obsidian finally got its first round of internal funding, $36 million, I was elated. Whitaker took me out for bourbon at a quiet bar in Foggy Bottom, told me I was the backbone of the future. 3 weeks later, I found out he'd held a briefing without me introducing himself as chief architect. He said it was just politics, said I'd get my time. Stay in the shadows for now, he told me. That's where you're strongest. I believed him. That was my second mistake. Over the next 2 years, we grew the initiative from whiteboard to weapon. Obsidian became a defense doctrine in everything but name adopted quietly by 5 branches recommended in foreign briefings, whispered about in NATO corridors. And through it all, I kept my head down. I got promoted, but not publicly. Got cited, but not mentioned. I signed NDAs that stitched my mouth shut and tattooed my loyalty into my palms. But every system we built worked. That was enough. Until the funding hit $130 million. And suddenly, I wasn't useful. I was a liability. A woman with authorship over a system that could rewrite cyber defense history without a single general's name on the spine. They started freezing me out months ago, canceled briefings, shuffled departments, transferred my staff without notice. The whispers were louder than the silence, emotional, unstable, hard to manage. It was coordinated. Whitaker had decided I was no longer his asset. I was his threat. But the thing he didn't account for, I build systems that don't need permission to protect themselves. And I always leave myself a back door. They didn't fire me. They dismantled me, bit by bit, access by access, visibility by visibility. After the 63% pay cut, they didn't just stop at my salary. That was the opener, the warning shot, a signal to everyone else on payroll. This is what happens when you forget your place. Within a week, my executive keycard stopped working in 3 buildings. I had full clearance to last month. The internal Slack account I'd built a community around gone, deactivated with no notice. The intern I mentored for 2 years, reassigned to a new priority task force. The analyst I trained on behavioral breach signatures, now reposting a rewritten version of my model on LinkedIn, citing Whitaker as the originator. My inbox flooded with performance metrics that didn't match reality. I was removed from calendar invites, then CC'd after meetings ended. They never said you're not welcome here. They just rearranged the furniture until I no longer had a place to sit. The worst part. People I trusted stopped replying. Diane. Quiet. Hesitant. Omar. Hey, I'm under review too. Gotta play it safe. Nina, who used to call me her big sister in code, now forwarded my last email to HR and CC'd me on accident. They weren't betraying me, not really. They were trying to survive. And in this world, government contracts, classified budgets, power games that stretch across 5 departments, survival means silence. I could feel the campaign tightening around me like a noose. The same man who used to call me the future of warfighting now described me off record as volatile, too ambitious, reckless with protocol. The memo leaked 2 weeks after the cut, subject Rachel Ford, access reassessment. Due to ongoing concerns about stability and operational cohesion, recommend suspension of Tier 4 clearances pending internal audit. Jenner Marcus Whitaker. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I was shocked, but because of how efficient it was. He was erasing me, legally, carefully. It was a blueprint, and I knew it by heart because I wrote it once to keep a mole out of our own system. Now that same design was being used on me. Then came the moment that broke something I didn't even know was holding on. I walked into a NATO-backed training simulation where I was scheduled to demo the real-time responsiveness protocol from Obsidian, the heartbeat mechanism I'd designed to detect long-dormant malware patterns. But when I scanned my badge, access denied. The message blinked red across the screen. I tried again, same thing. The junior officer at the desk, some kid barely out of grad school, looked at me and said, "Sorry, Ms. Ford, but you're not on the list. Ms. Ford. No doctor, no architect. Not even ma'am. Just Ms. Ford." Like I was someone's aunt who wandered into a restricted demo by mistake. I stepped back, nodded, thanked him, and I walked out with my heart in my throat. Later that day, I passed the glass-walled war room where Whitaker was giving a briefing. His hands waved, his voice confident. He was describing the very protocol I had built, calling it Whitaker's watchdog. A junior analyst leaned toward another and whispered, "Didn't Rachel design that?" The reply, "Yeah, but she's not cleared anymore. Guess they found something." I kept walking, didn't stop, didn't breathe. Not until I reached my apartment, closed the door, and sat on the floor in the dark. No lights, no movement, just me. and the echo of the sentence that kept ringing in my head. Guess they found something. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did what I always do when the walls close in. I opened the drawer, the one I keep locked under my desk. Inside were the things no one asked about anymore: a faded lanyard from my first White House briefing, a field coin from a task force in Stuttgart, a dusty photo of me and my sister Hannah at a science fair when we were 12. She's holding a medal, I'm holding a keyboard, and a folder. Blue, handwritten, hers. It was a scholarship essay she wrote in college, back when she still thought I was the smartest person in the world. The prompt was, "Who is your hero?" She wrote, "My sister builds invisible shields to protect people who will never know her name. She never asks for credit. She doesn't wear medals. But if I ever become brave, it'll be because I saw her fight quiet battles and win anyway." I read that line 5 times. Then I closed the folder, and I stood up. Whitaker didn't just want me erased. He wanted my silence. He wanted to keep building his career on my code, my models, my invisible work, the same work that Hannah believed could make the world safer, and he wanted to do it without my name. But I've spent my life building systems that leave footprints. Data doesn't lie, code remembers, and so do I. I pulled up the original Obsidian archive, the one they didn't know I kept air-gapped, encrypted, cold-stored. I scrolled to the module that started it all. Line 1, on Initial Heartbeat Protocol, authored by R.F. Ave 0317 UTC. My initials, my timestamp, my fingerprint. And not just there, everywhere. In the syntax patterns, the algorithm weights, the debug logs with my private encryption tag built into the checksum itself. Whitaker could plagiarize my words in the PowerPoint decks, but he couldn't rewrite the heartbeat because it was mine, and now it was time to wake it up. There's a moment after betrayal where the anger fades and something worse moves in numbness. I'd felt it once before. The day I sat in an oncology room beside Hannah while the doctor talked about probabilities. I remember her fingers clenching the sleeve of my jacket like she was holding on for both of us. And I remember staring at the back of the doctor's clipboard, trying to understand how something that had been growing inside her for months could still be invisible to everyone in the room until it was too late. That was the first time I realized silence could be a weapon. This was the second. I stopped sleeping. Nights blurred into research. I became a ghost in my own apartment, cold pizza on the counter terminal windows, open on 3 monitors, encryption patterns swimming across my vision. The lights stayed off most days, not out of depression, out of preservation. The less they saw, the less they could take. One night, I opened a secure terminal and ran a traceback protocol through the metadata of Obsidian's current public release, the one they had renamed, reshaped, rebranded. The file came back clean, sanitized. Every name scrubbed except one, Whitaker J. But code isn't polite. I followed the Digital Echo's ghost data embedded deep in the structure comments left behind by lazy junior devs commits on GitHub-like staging servers they never thought anyone would crawl. And there it was, my identifier, RF0317X, buried inside a comment that had been copied and pasted dozens of times without being rewritten. They could strip the paint off the building, but the blueprint was still mine. I should have felt vindicated. I didn't. I felt tired. 2 days later, I showed up to HQ for what I thought was a compliance check-in. Instead, I was escorted by 2 security personnel quietly to a review room. No windows, 1 chair, a screen. Standard protocol, the officer said. They told me I'd be interviewed about a potential breach of ethical standards. Whitaker's fingerprints were all over it. He wasn't trying to fire me. He was trying to discredit me, have me on record as unstable, difficult, insubordinate. This was the final act of erasure. I sat in that room for 3 hours. No one came in. No one explained anything. Just silence and the tick of the overhead light and the metallic taste of injustice in my mouth. And then a voice crackled through the wall speaker. "Ms. Ford, we're concluding the review. You're free to go. No explanation, no apology, just an open door." I walked out like I had just escaped a hostage negotiation with my own legacy. Back in the hallway, no one looked up. No one saw me. That's when it hit me I was already gone in their minds. I was a ghost, an anomaly, a line of code that had been deprecated and marked for deletion. Back in my apartment, I sat in the dark again. Only this time, I brought out the box. Not the one with my sister's letters. The other one. The one I hadn't opened in 5 years. Inside were all the things I had earned but never displayed: a Navy Civilian Service Medal, a classified operations citation from a breach intercept in Belgium, an unopened letter from Secretary Westwood thanking me for my invisible contributions. I had told myself these things didn't matter. But in that moment, they did, because they were real, and everything happening now, the whispers, the isolation, the smears, that was politics. But this box, this was proof. I pulled out the letter from Westwood and ran my fingers over the embossed seal. And then I asked myself a question I hadn't let surface until that very moment. Do I want to save my job or my name? Because they were no longer the same. Saving my job would mean laying low. Accepting the demotion? Staying quiet. Letting the storm pass. Saving my name? That would mean war. That night, I closed every blind in my apartment. I shut off my phone. I powered up my isolated server, the one with no connection to any federal network, the one only I knew about. And I pulled up a shell window. My fingers hovered above the keys, and I whispered out loud to no one. Let's see if you remember who wrote you. Then I started typing, line by line. I wasn't hacking, I wasn't breaching, I was documenting, pulling every original version of Obsidian's code, every commit log, every contributor note, every decision tree tagged with my initials. I wrapped it all in a secure time-stamped archive, unbreakable, legally verifiable. And then I wrote a letter, a real one, to a journalist I trusted, someone who once covered me in an off-record profile back when Obsidian was still just theory. The letter wasn't a bomb. It was a breadcrumb trail, just enough to make her curious, just enough to make someone else look. And that's all I needed. Because the only thing more powerful than code is truth written by the one who lived it. I didn't need to burn down the building. I just needed to turn on the lights. After sending the encrypted archive to the journalist first name Kendra, a war tech reporter from Defense Scope, I waited. No message, no reply, just a confirmation ping from my secure relay that the file had been opened. Then, silence. That kind of silence used to terrify me. Now I recognized it for what it was, a pause before a wave. In the meantime, I built the failsafe, a legal one. No leaks, no anonymous attacks, nothing reckless. Instead, I crafted a single line of code buried inside a harmless diagnostic string embedded with a cryptographic watermark, my signature. Unique to me and provable. I uploaded it legally to an open-source NATO forum under a technical bug report for Obsidian's new Watchdog module. I titled the report, False Positive Trigger Due to Legacy Signal ID. See timestamp RF-317X for origin. That was it. No claims, no accusations, no drama, just one line, one timestamp, one breadcrumb. Within 72 hours, I had 5 DMs in my private forum inbox. One was from an engineer in Brussels. Curious about your tag. That string matches deep code I saw in a 2020 Obsidian draft. That yours one was from a British intelligence liaison. Your watermark popped up in our validation sandbox. Thought it was deprecated. Is it active again? But the one that changed everything came from a junior systems auditor from Estonia, barely out of university. She simply wrote, "Why is your name gone from everything? If you built it." Meanwhile, Defensoscope dropped the article. Title, The Woman Behind the Code, Who Really Built Project Obsidian. They didn't name names, but they didn't have to. They quoted the debug logs. They referenced the metadata. They cited the same timestamp I had embedded RF-317-X and linked it to white papers I'd published years before. It was clinical, precise, unignorable. The article was shared over 3,000 times within 24 hours. Then came the tweet. Not from me. From a former congressional aide, someone who remembered my briefings during early funding phases. Can confirm. Rachel Ford presented Obsidian to House Defense Subcommittee in 2021. General Whitaker wasn't in the room. The replies exploded. One caught my eye. Funny how women only get credit in footnotes, except this time the footnotes are fighting back. That same day, I received a request for interview from Foreign Policy Weekly. I declined. Then one from the DoD Office of Inspector General. Not a request, a summons. They didn't want to talk about the code. They wanted to talk about authorship, the legal kind. Apparently, the moment my debug line hit NATO servers and was verified by an outside agency, questions flooded internal departments. Questions like, why was Rachel Ford's name on none of the final drafts? Why was she demoted the same week funding was renewed? Why was a general credited with technical authorship outside his scope? That's when I knew it was working. Not because people were defending me, but because they were afraid of being caught defending him. 3 days later, Whitaker tried to get ahead of it. He issued a press statement full of non-denials, collaborative spirit, team-led design, adaptive execution model, multi-authorship. Classic spin. But it was too late. Because the system he tried to control had one fatal flaw. It remembered me. And not just in the code, in the people. A retired Air Force colonel posted a thread on LinkedIn outlining the early development phase. His caption, "Let the architect speak." 3 of my former staffers sent me private messages. "We're sorry. We saw what they did. We were afraid. But we're not anymore." That night, I sat on my balcony in Seattle, phone in one hand, whiskey in the other, watching my name flash in and out of defense forums across 3 continents. No interview, no camera, just code, just proof. Then came the real turning point. A private email from the Pentagon's Joint Ethics Review Board. You are invited to testify in closed session regarding the authorship chain of custody and development timeline of the Obsidian system. In plain English, they were opening a file, and I would be holding the pen. I stared at the screen for a long time, not in fear, not in anticipation, but in relief. Because the room they tried to lock me out of, they just invited me back into. Only this time I'd walk in with receipts. The Pentagon subcommittee chamber is colder than I remember. Not temperature-wise, functionally colder. No handshakes, no small talk. Just 10 people behind identical black monitors and a single nameplate waiting for me at the center table. Rachel Ford, technical witness. I walk in alone. No lawyer, no PR handler. Just a slim folder under my arm and a flash drive in my pocket that could end someone's career if I wanted it to. Whitaker isn't here, but I can feel his fingerprints on every chair. The chairperson clears her throat. "Ms. Ford, thank you for joining us." I nod once. "We'll begin with a summary of your technical contributions to the Obsidian program." I place the folder on the table and open it slowly. Inside are printed copies of signed white papers, original timestamp logs, encrypted checksum signatures, and a validation packet from the Estonian Defense Forum verifying my digital watermark in their NATO-linked sandbox. I speak clearly without theatrics. I authored the heartbeat protocol that underpins Obsidian's breach detection system. My cryptographic signature RF0317X appears in over 84% of core files, including in modules now credited solely to General Whitaker. A silence settles over the room. Not defensive, calculating. They were expecting something more fragile, something more emotional. What they got was evidence. A younger member of the panel leans forward. "Are you alleging General Whitaker deliberately removed your name from official documentation?" I don't blink. I'm not alleging it. I'm proving it. I insert the flash drive. The screen lights up. One by one, I show the original Git commit logs, metadata trails, mail exchanges approving features I led, draft documents with my annotations but final PDFs without my name. By the end, the room feels heavier. Someone exhales in disbelief. Then the chairperson speaks again. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" I pause. Then answer simply. Because when you build a system designed to protect without visibility, you forget to protect yourself. She nods. Quietly. Not with sympathy, with recognition. Later in the closed session, someone asks if I'd like to officially file an ethics grievance. I say yes. Then they ask if I'd like to remain in my current contractor position pending investigation. I say no. And when they ask what I want, I tell them the truth. I want my name back. And I want a record that says I didn't stay silent when someone tried to erase me. The next morning, the news leaks. Obsidian's original architect testifies in Pentagon ethics review. They don't name Whitaker directly, but the subtext is clear. By midday, I get the call I knew was coming. General Whitaker has submitted his resignation citing health reasons. He won't be charged. He won't be demoted. He won't be paraded through courtrooms or splashed across newspapers. But he also won't be remembered as the father of Obsidian, because that title is no longer free for theft. I sit in my apartment with the windows open, Seattle breeze drifting in. My inbox is full. Reporters, former colleagues, silent allies who suddenly found their voices. One message stands out. A reply from the British intel contact. Your heartbeat is still live in our simulations. Elegant work. One of the best defensive systems I've seen in a decade. Just 6 words at the end. You built something that will outlast him. I don't respond. I don't need to. Because this isn't about Whitaker anymore. It never really was. It's about every architect who's been made invisible. Every woman who built a system and was told to sit behind it. Every line of code that carried a name until someone stronger, louder, and higher ranking stole it. Well, my code fought back, and it won. That weekend, I mail my badge back. No ceremony, no note. Just the metal rectangle in a padded envelope with a return address. I walk outside. Sunlight paints the sidewalk. I breathe. And for the first time in over a decade, I feel seen. I don't miss DC. I miss building. Not the meetings, not the politics, not the weight of someone else's rank brushing off my achievements like lint. I miss the moment when a piece of code hums in the back of your brain, and you know this can protect people. So I built something new. 6 months after the hearing, I started a private foundation in Boston. Not big, not flashy. Just a quiet team of cyber specialists, engineers, and students, many of them women dedicated to building open-access digital security tools for journalists, human rights defenders, and non-governmental emergency teams operating in dangerous regions. We call it Glassroot, because real protection should be invisible and unbreakable, like the shield I should have built for myself years ago. I teach now, too, 1 semester each fall at MIT. They wanted me for a full professorship, but I declined. I don't want tenure. I want impact. I teach 1 course defensive system architecture for threat environments. And on the first day, I give every student the same line of advice if they try to erase your name from what you've built. Hide it somewhere they'll never think to look. They laugh. They think I'm being clever. But I'm dead serious. I haven't spoken to Whitaker since his resignation. Last I heard, he took a consulting role in a private think tank. No criminal charges, no public rebuke, just faded authority. He'll still be invited to events, but he'll never stand at a podium and talk about Obsidian again. Because people remember now, and when they Google it, they find me. I still have the box, the one with the metal and the old lanyards. But now I've added something new to it. The printed Defense Scope article, a thank you note from the Estonian audit team, and a postcard from the intern they tried to reassign who now works for NATO Cyber Defense and emails me code sometimes. She signs off every message the same way, heartbeat intact. Michelle, my partner, says I breathe differently now. I asked what she meant. She said, you used to inhale like you were preparing for a hit. Now you breathe like you're allowed to exhale. She's not wrong. I spent so many years anticipating betrayal that I forgot what peace felt like. Peace isn't silence, it's space. It's walking into a room and knowing you don't need to prove you belong there because you built it. The thing is, I didn't win by yelling louder. I didn't fight dirty. I fought clearly, cleanly, and in code. The same code I built for systems is the same structure I now use for myself. Anticipate the breach. Leave a record. Validate the source. Never beg for backup. Build it. People ask if I regret not going public sooner. Maybe. But I also know I couldn't have survived that storm 5 years ago. Not fully. I hadn't built the shield yet. And you can't walk into fire until you know what part of yourself won't burn. Now I'm fireproof. One final thing. I got a letter last month, handwritten, thick envelope. No return address. Inside was a copy of my sister Hannah's scholarship essay. I thought I'd lost it. At the bottom, in a different pen, someone had written, "She's still protecting people who will never know her name. But now, they'll know." I don't know who sent it. Maybe it was a former staffer. Maybe it was just fate circling back. Either way, I smiled, folded it carefully, and added it to the box. Because that's what a system is, not the code you write once, but the legacy it leaves when you're no longer in the room.